And she said, you gotta dress up for the part. So I'm not really a reenactor like these people, I just play one on television. Folks, Elizabeth Bornito, the spirit and energy behind the Rendez-vous Festival. Elizabeth.
Thank you, John. Can you hear me? Okay. Welcome everyone to the Rendez-vous at St. Anne de Détroit. This is our third annual Rendez-vous, and we're thrilled that you're here. And I want to especially thank Tom Mann and the Detroit Mass Mob for being here today. Is Tom still in the house? He's probably eating. I don't see him. Well, Tom came last year to our festival, and he liked what he saw, and so he told me that he would bring the Mass Mob this year. And so I'm very, very indebted to him and to everyone who came, so thank you very much. So John does like to talk a lot, so he lied. He is a mover and a shaker in the French colonial history and heritage movement of Detroit. What we like to say is that we would like to put the accent back on Detroit, because Detroit is a French town. My family and I have two ancestors that were with Cadillac in the original founding convoy. So St. Anne's was founded 2 days after that, and so St. Anne's is our ancestral home. And so when people think about the Rendezvous, it's not just your typical church festival. What it is to us, we're coming home to our church parish. It's also a family reunion, because many of you might not know this, but for the French Canadians, we are all really about one ancestor. Yeah, we're all very closely related, at least by one ancestor. So, thinking of that, we are going to have the first ever Tremblay family meetup in the school at 3:30. And I happen to descend from the Tremblays. They are the largest family in North America of French Canadians. So can anybody raise their hand if you're a Tremblay? Anybody in the house? Tremblay? Okay, so you want to be in the school for our meetup, okay? So I'm going to turn it back over to John, but again, thank you very much for coming, and I will be back in a little while to talk about French Canadian Heritage Week in Michigan, which the Rendezvous is the kickoff event. So thank you very much.
Merci. Très bien. I would like to introduce another member of the committee who's also a member of the board of the Alliance Française of Detroit with me. And she really is someone who straddles the river, grew up on the other side and lives on this side now. Stephanie Potier is a French teacher in Bloomfield School District, and also very, very active in these things. And she just reminded me of something. I said, Stephanie, tell them yourself.
Bonjour tout le monde! Comment allez-vous ce soir?
Bonjour, bonjour!
Vous allez bien?
Oui!
Bien, comme ci, comme ça, mal. Bien, super! Moi, j'enseigne le français at West Hills Middle School. I'm a French teacher at West Hills Middle School. But it's not about me today, it's about this wonderful festival and what's out there. So you have a moment between acts, and we have some excellent artisans out in the square here that have made some really cool things for St. Anne's, specifically for this festival. So I invite you, I encourage you to step out into the square now that the rain has stopped and have a taste of some really unique food, and also have a chance to look at some of the amazing craftsmanship out there. So have a wonderful afternoon, and amusez-vous bien, have fun.
Merci Stephanie, merci, merci. You know, a lot of people ask, gee, it must be hard to learn foreign languages. And when you think about the people who first came here 300 some years ago, they had to speak the French that they came with, and they had to speak one or two or maybe more native languages just to get by. So does that mean they were that much more intelligent than we are today as a monolingual society? No, no, no. And this is something that I like to explain to people. I was raised in a monolingual household. Nobody in my family ever traveled anywhere or learned a foreign language, and I got really lucky. And I took some French in high school a few years, and I was okay at it, but yeah, it wasn't really a big deal. What I learned later is that we've been taught in the United States that you have to be Einstein or some sort of genius to be able to learn a foreign language. And I've learned that's not the case. It's just not the case. I was lucky enough to... Hello? How about this? Better now? No?
Un peu meilleur.
Step back here a bit. Okay, good, thank you. So, I was really lucky. I went to college in an engineering school, and the school had an exchange program with a French language engineering school in Switzerland. And I said, what the heck? Why don't I just go and do that? Because as an engineer, the math is math, the curves are curves, the words aren't that important, and we engineers were pretty illiterate anyway, right? That's true, yeah. So I was really lucky. I got thrown in at age 20 and spent 11 months in complete immersion. And I learned something very important. The cleaning lady in my dormitory could speak 4 languages. I said, whoa, how is that possible? Because you have to be a genius to learn a foreign language. How can you learn 3 other ones? And I soon learned that in many places, especially places like Belgium and Holland, places like that, foreign languages, you just do it because you're exposed to it. You're just exposed to it. And I realized we've handicapped ourselves in this country by convincing ourselves that, oh, you can't learn foreign language. It's really, you got to be really smart. It's not true. It's not true. Some people are better at it than the others, like learning music. Some people have an ear for it. But overall, I'm asked to give talks about this up at Open University every semester to open up us Midwestern Americans who are just otherwise not having an opportunity to speak and to learn other languages. We're not forced to, we don't have to. Oh, the rest of the world speaks English. Don't waste your time. And I've learned throughout my career, 30 plus years, working for almost exclusively non-American companies. And I have nothing against American companies, I just like being the weirdo who's explaining Americans to foreigners and foreigners to Americans. I've learned that learning a language or not doesn't mean how intelligent you are. It just simply means how lucky you have been growing up. I grew up with friends who were really good ice skaters. Why? Because somebody in their family took them out skating when they were 2 or 3 years old. And I didn't get on a pair of skates until I was 19, and I was terrible. I still am. So it's like learning to skate. If you learn it young, you're forced to do it, you have reason to do it, you can. And so I always encourage people, it's never too late. Yes, of course, it's easier when you're young. But if you're in I had the good fortune to force my sons, drop them into French language school in France when they were 9 and 7 years old. I said, they may hate me someday, they may hate me now, but they'll probably thank me someday. And people said, oh, how did that work? How could you do that? I said, well, when the teacher said blah, 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 and you didn't understand a word and everybody got out their math books, you learned that blah, 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 blah means get out your math books. All right? And when you have to do it every day, not just an hour in class, it comes to you, it sticks with you, and you remember it. And are you going to make mistakes? Absolutely. I've made some real doozies in my time. I spent 10 years living in French-speaking countries, and I have made some big mistakes. So this is just something for those of you who are interested in your French-Canadian heritage. You can learn French at places like the Alliance Française. Sorry, what happened? Well, something like the Alliance Française. We have adult classes in the evening out in West Bloomfield. There are other organizations as well. There's meetup French groups. Some of you had it in high school or college. You want to do it. But even if you don't do it, the language is key to understanding the culture. And it's the culture that is the real joy and gemstone. When you begin to understand and say, this is what my grandparents or my great-grandparents did. This is the real joy. So I would encourage a lot of you to do it. It's unfortunate that we lost native French speakers on this side of the river, but there's thousands on the other side of the river, and their events are open. They're always happy to have English speakers there, and I personally am active in the organizations on the other side. If anybody wants to, I'll give you a card today. If you're ever interested in going to see what native French-speaking culture is like here at the Strait, on both sides of the Strait. That's what Detroit means, the Strait. So I'm happy to take anybody over, and some of my Canadian friends are here today. They're always happy when I bring over people from the other side. And despite that invisible line in the middle of the river, it's not the end of the world to cross the river. A lot of us think, if you don't have a passport, yeah, it's not possible, or an enhanced driver's license. But one of the objectives of what we're doing is to people to realize that on both sides of the river, this was a major transportation artery. It was no use living where we are now unless you were next to the river. There was no transportation. So you could have the best land in the world, but if you didn't have a way to transport, it was no good. The irony is this huge main street that everybody wanted to live on after the first 100 years, an invisible line was drawn between the British Empire and the United States, and it became problematic to go across the street. That's essentially what it was. So French people on both sides of the river and Native Americans had problems going back and forth. And in fact, one of the great, I'll finish with this, one of the great court cases of the Michigan Territory Supreme Court, 1808, there was a French man, lived on one side of the river, grew his grain, but he always took his grain across the river to one of the windmills on the other side of the river. By the way, because this area is so flat, to grind grain, there wasn't any traditional water mills. It was too flat. There were windmills up and down both sides of the Detroit River. Once he'd been doing it, his family had been taking grain across for milling into flour and coming back. 4 generations they've been doing it. After they drew the line in the middle of the river, there were customs agents, and they said, "You can't do that. You're crossing the border. You have to pay duty on the value added on goods going across." He said, "My family's been doing it for generations. I want to continue doing it." He took it to court, ended up taking it to the territory of Michigan. Michigan wasn't a state yet, still a territory, and ended up winning his case. The Supreme Court of Michigan said, due to the family generational, there's no tariff, no tax going back and forth across the river for French Canadians who have been doing it for generations. Unfortunately, the War of 1812 broke out 4 years later and complicated the border a little bit more. But nevertheless, we have a rich history along the river here, and unfortunately, Detroit's only known for cars, which is my industry. Not criticizing it, but we have so much more here that we can do. And this is the point of what we're doing here. to save our famous landmarks and to try to give another aspect to Detroit. Detroit is French, has a longer history than New Orleans does, a longer French history than New Orleans does. So we want to put the accent back on Detroit, Détroit, because it's an important part of our history that we should get to know and recognize. And some of us have the crazy dream, and I'll mention this again, of rebuilding Fort Pontchartrain, Cadillac's original fort, somewhere along the river. There's lots of industrial land that needs to be repurposed, and that's what we're thinking of doing. This is one of the suggestions we had from my friends, my French-Canadian friends in Windsor. They said, you know what, you guys, we should all rebuild Fort Pontchartrain. I said, it's on the American side of the river. He said, who cares? Who cares? If Fort Pontchartrain was rebuilt, it would be witness to the fact that the French Canadians were here and doing it with Native American village next door, because that's why this is here in the first place. Trade, mutually beneficial commerce between the French and the Native Americans here is the reason why this crazy town and its Canadian mirror across the river exist. So how are we doing, guys? You getting there? Okay, all right, not to push you. Sure, yeah, why don't you put some on? So rather than bore you with any more of these stories, so anyway, just comment. I'm assuming most of you don't know that there is a large French community, 7,000-8,000 people. That's not nothing. Right now on the other side of the river. And because it takes passports to get across, they're hesitant to come over here. And since 9/11, we're hesitant, we need the passports to go over there. And one of my dreams is to connect this French-Canadianophile, assimilated French-Canadian people, and the French expats. You know, there's 4,000 or 5,000 people from France working for the big French companies, Faurecia, Valeo, Plastic Omnium, etc. There's dozens of French companies here represented by the French-American Chamber of Commerce. Is Cedric here? Where's Cedric? There he is, Cedric. We'd like to welcome now the president of the French-American Chamber of Commerce that I've known for a number of years. This French guy like me, we both married American women, so we all make mistakes, but that's okay. That's a joke. It's a joke, ladies, huh? I tell that to my wife, too, huh? Just joking. So, Cedric and his organization have been very helpful in supporting our event. I'd like to ask Cedric to say a few words.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. What a wonderful gathering. French companies are very present here in Michigan. It's a testament to the long-standing friendship between Michigan and France. The French were here 200 years ago and they are still here today. 300 years ago and they are still here today. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the organization of this wonderful event. And we'll be back again here next year.
Merci Cédric. Merci. Ouais. So most people don't realize that Detroit itself, because of the auto industry here, is a major crossroads for tons of foreign companies. Cedric, for example, is an employee of...
John, we're ready to go.
Got you. That's a good way to say, shut up, John. Of Faurecia. But just to finish, I'm in the international side of the automotive business. The great advantage of Detroit is everybody from anywhere in the automotive world has some office here. A bigger R&D center, a smaller R&D center, some sort of work, and it makes the international crossroads of the automotive industry here. So I will now present a group that I've known for quite a while since I first came across them at a Rochester Park event 10 years ago. I don't remember. They got me dancing back then. I said, my gosh, there's people doing French-Canadian music. So I would like to present Gino Picard and La Compagnie. Gino, take it away.
Thank you.
Gino, pardon, Gino.
Guitar case. Here, I can't see. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah. Okay. No, I'm just not going to use my 12 string. You want that?
All right. Am I coming out there, Steve?
Can we get a little more Nelly up here? The fiddle, please. Oh yeah, you can bring that.
Go on a little bit more, please. A little bit more. Come on a bit, please. There we go. Good, thank you.
Can you hear that fiddle out there?
Shall we just do a song and get going and take it? Not ready?
Not quite. What a great event this is. The rain didn't stop anybody, did it? Didn't even slow you down. We are almost ready. We're going to get our bass man up and running.
We come to you from all parts of Michigan. Gino is from Détroit.
Warren,
Warren.
on the other side.
Mark Zibble is from Romeo. Jean-Marie Learman is from Saginaw. Nellie O is originally from St. Joe, now in Saginaw.
St. John.
St. John's.
The other J.
I'm from Bay City, so took a little bit to get here, but so well worth it. And we also are pleased to have our dancer with us, and she's from the Ann Arbor area as well.
What do you think, Steve? You ready for us over there?
You know, the board tried to tell me.
It's coming through the monitor just fine.
Okay. Let's give it a shot.
Let's give it a shot. I like the sound of that.
First two tunes are called Eddie LaPlante's Reel and Rio du Montréal. And Sherbrooke, I always forget that one, sorry. Here we go. playing happy music and making wine for our children. Well, next song is called La Bon Vent. I have just one difficult time on this. Sans bon chanson. It's a tongue twister for me. Here we go. 1, 2, here we go.